So nice to see everyone spending their Sunday evening with us. Give it another minute or so, and then we'll get started. People are still coming in. Hello, hello. How's it looking? Should we get started, Susan?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wholeness, 440 Gallery's 17th annual Small Work Show. This is the Artist Talk and Curators Talk. We're lucky to have the curator with us today. This is a National George show. It's a collection of artwork in a range of media and styles. And this year, for the first time, we have a category of small performances. So please, if you can, come by to the gallery in person, because it's amazing to see this in person. If you can't make it in person, you can find the entire show is up on Facebook. Go to 440 Gallery. And by the way, small works tend to be an affordable gift. So stop by, we're open. The gallery's open Wednesday through Friday from 4 to 7 and 11 to 7 on Saturday and Sunday. And also it's up through January 7th. So you have some time to see it. But without further ado, allow me to introduce our curator. George Del Barrio is a first-generation American and all-media creative producer. He's deeply versed in photographic physics. George's practice is concentrated on archetype expansion and site-responsive design. Del Barrio is the founding creative director and executive producer of the Vanderbilt Republic and Midheaven Network. So we'll be hearing more about George, but let's go ahead and take a look at the show, and with a little accompaniment by Andy Ong.
oh, we're not hearing. Is it muted? I think it might be muted. Oops, let's see. One moment.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Andy.
Thank you, no problem.
And now, without further ado, George, welcome. Congratulations on a beautifully conceived small work show. Your
Thank you,
chosen
Tiffany.
theme and the title of the show is Wholeness. What did this concept mean to you, and how did it influence your selections?
Thank you for asking, and it is a wonderful honor to be here with everyone. And I do want to shout out Amy Williams for inviting me in this year. It's a particular pleasure working with her, knowing all she's done in her tenure and her time at 440. And of course, the gallery itself is about as prestigious as Park Slope gets for homegrown cooperative galleries. And it is an exquisite pleasure to be part of the gallery's history. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Wholeness. Wholeness was a word that was bouncing around in my head a lot in 2020. And, you know, that pause that we had last year was about as unprecedented as a moment that I had experienced personally in adult life, and was extremely necessary for me to begin to actually reflect and deepen my own understanding of what I had been living through and working through as a person, as a parent, as a professional, with all the layers of self. And inside of the space that was given last year, you know, with an actual stop, a deeper sense of the parallels between the personal and the social search for wholeness started to truly come down on me. And primarily an understanding that the vast majority of the work actually happens in the shadow. And so accordingly, it felt like a really strong prompt for a group selection where you would be getting feedback from all kinds of artists across the spectrum. And particularly with the unique experiences that I've had doing large scale open call mixed media art shows, I have learned to trust in the innate wisdom and genius of artists and actually stay out of their way as much as possible. And so I felt like it was a phenomenal prompt to jump off on, with, you know, a very wide diaspora of people to be addressing. And it ended up giving us wonderful results.
I agree. Thank you. So, George, this installation of the works you selected is really striking. I know it was done with careful attention to detail. Can you speak to our audience about the installation? And if you like, Susan can bring us back through specific shots if you want to talk about details.
Maybe the most instructive exhibition view might be any one that just shows a wide array of walls. You know, as was mentioned in your reading of my bio, archetype expansion is an important part of my practice. And the Vanderbilt Republic is the production consultancy that I founded in 2008 after a career in commercial photography that left me with many skills and an incredible amount of disenchantment with the corporate agenda. And so a lot of the fundamental workings of what VR does is bring over these kind of commercial standards and practices into everything we do at all times. And so, you know, that expresses itself in the care and attention that we put into the installations we do. And typically, I have a little bit more of a crew when I do site-specific installations, but with a space this size, it was actually quite a pleasure to have the room to myself and play and tinker and feel things out. And after the amazing renovations at 440 Gallery, with the phenomenal walls you've got, there's actually a lot of space to play. If you were to start lifting off pieces here and there, you might actually find little constellations of holes around wherever I ended up actually going with the final screw, because I've got the latitude of the physical space. And so a lot of it was very much by feel, you know, determining. You remember during the beginning day when we were first loading in, all I asked you guys were for center marks on each of the walls at 60 inches. And so that would allow me to start to build up a sense of coordinate energy in the space as it moves across and start building on top of that. You know, but after that, a lot of it is story making. And sometimes when it comes to storytelling, I have found that it's useful to have the beginning and the end of the story worked out and then work your way through the middle, sometimes from both ends, sometimes from the middle out. And so some of these installation walls are themed around concepts of wholeness as they relate really literally into tone and color or texture, and then some move into the energy and the emotional content of the work. And there is a duality in the space between what happens in the storefront section and what happens behind. Those are meant to be two separate statements, and the flower pot, the incredibly controversial flower pot installation, is actually the anchor of it all. Portraying the idea that no matter where we are, we're always on a precipice.
Beautiful. Do you want to say more about the vase controversy?
I mean, it's kind of weak to do it without the artist present. She hated the placement. She believed that it was out of sight and out of mind.
I don't know if she's here. She could unmute if she is.
I would love it. I've actually, full disclosure, I asked for her to be part of the panel so we could have a steel cage match out in front of the whole world. I mean, I'm actually really excited to talk about these things, to be honest, but during the installation, she wasn't in that kind of a mood, and all she wanted was for me to just move the work, and that wasn't going to happen during the opening. The bottom line is that the artist just felt like it wasn't present in the room. And for better or worse, a lot of my experience and my work in site-specific installation encompasses all surfaces. So I take everything into consideration when I work in any given space.
And I think that speaks to your concept of telling a story, but you're the person hanging the work, telling the story, and it could be seen in different ways. So it's fascinating. So if any of you visit the gallery, you'll notice that there's a Curator's Choice Award that went to Paul Werhoon. And George, I wonder if you could speak to what went into that selection.
I am a little bit of a process and practice junkie. I'm like a little bit of an old school samurai monk believer that practice is the only way to get anywhere with your work and your life. And in terms of what it means to actually literally create art, there is a transference between the creator and the creation that is very present and very, very undeniable when it's involving such meticulous manipulation of physical objects and careful choice on placement and arrangement. And on top of that, with this work of his, it has an incredibly powerful backstory in terms of the iconography that's actually presented. It's not meant to be an abstract mosaic. This is an indigenous shaman, I believe. Paul provided us the reference image so that we could show it too. But I didn't know this actually going into it. And then when he told me this at the opening, I was not surprised at all, because as a curator, oftentimes I'm not using my eyes. I'm feeling my way through it. And there was a feeling and a presence and a sort of divinity to the work that grabbed me from the first second I saw it. And that was through the computer screen when I was going through thousands of applications. And then when we unpacked the work and had it in front of us, I was just struck. Audrey is another one, actually, in that case, where it's like I knew that once the work was actually physically in front of me, that it would be a whole other experience. And yeah, it's too bad the Eggman can't be here tonight. He's a lot of fun.
Yeah, do you want to say a little bit more about his process? Maybe the viewers don't understand what they're seeing.
Oof. I'll try to do it some justice. We spoke about it a little bit at the opening. So he is Austrian, Viennese. I'm forgetting. This is why I'm really nervous to tell his story for him, but where he's from, Turkish? No, shit. Well, sorry, I'm blanking on, but where he's from, there is a tradition of using eggs for painting them. And so he's lifting from this cultural tradition and making it very much his own with this work. And so with this, I think there's ostrich eggs and quail eggs, chicken eggs, and he dyes them, paints them alternately, scratches them, shapes them, forms them. It's a pretty wild practice.
So what the mosaic pieces we're looking at are actually shells of egg that he paints on before he mounts them on the surface. Correct.
Perhaps. I mean, it seems like some of them are shattered with a pre-existing pattern, and then some may have been painted after they've been glued.
Afterwards. Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't. All bets are off.
But it's all eggshell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eggs. His medium is eggs.
I wonder if he uses egg tempera.
Hmm.
We'll have to find out.
Yeah.
So, George, I have one more question for you. You selected over 80 small works for this show. What was your biggest challenge as a curator?
Whether or not a gallery space is big or small, and whether or not the artworks are big or small, one of the largest challenges is always actually making sure that in a group show, everything has enough space to be felt, like fully and unto itself, you know, and without a sense of competition, and you know, ideally finding ways to bring evocative qualities to arrangements of work that actually elevate everything. And you know, in a space like this one, where you know your average sight line with 60 degrees or so that a person sees can encompass quite a bit. The trick was in finding a ratio and an arrangement, a feeling that allowed us to still have that spaciousness. I think I did okay.
I would have to agree. Really beautiful. Thank you, George. I should mention that if you in the audience have questions, please either write them in the chat, and after we speak to all the artists, we will go through the questions. Or if when we've finished and have asked the questions in the chat, you want to unmute and ask the artist or George questions specifically, we'll have time for that at the end. So let's move on to Audrey Zavra Franklin. Hi, Audrey.
Hi, thank you.
Congratulations on being chosen for Wholeness. Can you speak to how your pieces connect to the theme of the show to start us off?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. I thought a lot about the concept of wholeness and how it related to my personal work. Wholeness to me really speaks to the concept of unity, harmonious coexistence, or completeness. And I really interpret this theme not from a place of perceived perfection, but from a synchronous place of everything is as it should be. My piece, Intercellular Obsidian, is part of my current collection called New Growth. And I'm deeply inspired by our natural world, especially the first signs of life after a long winter or after a forest fire when the landscape is unrecognizable from what we previously knew it to be. Those first signs of life are moss, lichen, and fungi. And when walking on top of them, we hardly notice their intricacies, their ability to thrive in a wide variety of conditions, their complex structure, or just how far-reaching these organisms expand. It's truly fascinating when you really start to take a moment and look. As I really began studying this category of plant life, I was impressed at their resilience and necessary foundation in our natural world. And as my collection evolved, I began to notice subtle themes in what we as a global society were faced with in these first small signs of life and how much they had in common. Globally, we were all examining our small decisions in different ways because we needed to stop and look closely, or had the imposed time to do so, similar to the ways you need to look to be able to appreciate moss, lichen, and fungi, to stop and look at it very closely. And really what we've been doing is examining our own foundational growth. We have opportunities now to be more inclusive and expansive than before, really to prioritize our truths in ways that weren't visible to us without looking closely. And to see the interconnectedness of our humanity and how much our quality of life reflects the individual choices we really make each day. And much like a forest fire, our lives may not grow back the same way, but our perception has really forever changed. That's the foundation of my collection, New Growth. And just as our world continues to evolve and expand in different ways than before, so does my collection. Frankly, so do I. It's been a truly immersive experience for me as an artist. I think radical wholeness is perhaps my personal theme in this, acceptance of every aspect of self as a relevant part of my experience, important for my journey, appreciative of the unknown, and to truly embrace how life will evolve and grow in awe of the ways in which it does and what I learn about myself in the process. So perhaps true wholeness is appreciating my synchronous strengths, my ability to focus not on the changes that happen around me, but my ability to adapt in what I do after when faced with unexpected change. Just like moss, lichen, and fungi, they don't question why things happen. They just so beautifully adapt.
Well said. Thank you, Audrey. So yeah, looking at this piece and hearing your words, it's very resonant. And that kind of leads me to my next question. So one of the amazing things about this show is the huge variety of techniques, mediums, methods. Can you speak about your unique process with this piece?
Sure. I really begin in nature as a part of it, as an observer and as a co-creator. I think that it's important for us to really acknowledge our place in this natural world, and we don't connect to nature, we are of nature. So I bring natural elements to my studio to study. Early in this collection, I had a variety of moss, lichen, and fungi I brought here and studied. I also collect fallen branches from 150-year-old sycamore trees in Brooklyn. I kiln dry them, I glaze them, and incorporate them into my work. My work is largely clay, but bringing these other elements in hints to the theme. So my style is not to reproduce elements of nature so that they are immediately recognizable. I don't focus on realism, but to create worlds in which the viewer can see natural elements reflected back to them and draw their own conclusions and their own interpretations. I'm constantly fascinated by what viewers see in my pieces, and I'll hear comments like, I see all the faces that you've hidden throughout your work. Or a lot of people see animals or coral. People have called my work artifacts, as if they have been dug up from the earth. And truly, those are all correct interpretations, because I think you see in art what is relevant for you at that moment in time. My process from a physical standpoint is identifying what type of shape I'd like to create first and building the structure, whether it's a wall hanging or a large vessel. And then I begin layering clay in a variety of lengths and thicknesses until I have a soft foundation in which to begin. If you can imagine like a strong structure, and then layering almost in ribbons and pieces clay, so that when you press it, some areas are harder and some are softer. So that's kind of like, so there's a strong structure underneath, and then there's a sort of a spongy next layer of structure. And then
so it's additive. So your process is additive. Because I couldn't tell if it was carved or if it was built up.
Sort of both. Once that spongy structure is in place, then I that's my favorite part is next, the favorite part of my process. It's the small detail work. And so I allow myself to be drawn through that process by how I feel, and sort of an interactive conversation with the clay in a way. I don't use any molds or textural elements. I get that question a lot. Like, I know you've seen, like, you can use anything as a mold, like a piece of coral, or you can purchase like those types of things. I don't use those. Every tiny detail is hand sculpted using simple sculpting tools. Thereby, each piece is absolutely unique. I go through a process using just a simple sticks, really, and create every single detail. And I like to also mix my own glaze. So I then go through a process with a variety of metals, mica powders, and base glazes, and I create my own unique glazes that speak to the overall theme and message I'm trying to portray. Recently, I've developed a new glaze that is fast becoming my favorite, that I've named Lineage. And that's like a deep antique bronze color, but I tend to prefer immersive experiences in my artwork. So having this level of engagement with my work really deeply fulfills me.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. So the consistent piece of all the artwork here is the relative smallness. What's it like working small for you? And is this a regular part of your art making process, or do you usually work larger? And what considerations are different for you at this scale?
For this particular collection, Intercellular Obsidian is one of my early pieces of this collection. And they were all small. I think as I was studying the tiny details, it felt relevant to create in a small way. And as the collection progressed, and as I get feedback from gallery owners and curators and jurors, I've been given so much feedback about creating larger pieces. So that for me has been helpful in the evolution of the collection. So I'm now working on a much larger scale. And I'm finding that to be really rewarding, because the unique challenges in scaling up are fueling my creativity in a lot of ways. You know, beginning so small in this way, and then having gallery owners come to my studio space and say, no, bigger, go bigger, bigger. And I'm like, oh, how bigger? Like much, much bigger. So it's been helpful because it's provided me with interesting challenges of how to take something this small and scale up. And I'm finding it to be really fun. The exploratory nature of this collection has been a particular type of inspiration for me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Audrey.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And if you get a chance, anyone who's watching, the photos are beautiful of the show, but it barely does it justice. It was so well curated and so beautifully hung. I really encourage everyone to go.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to Paul Brandwine. Hi, Paul.
Hello.
Congratulations to you on having your work selected for Wholeness.
Thank you.
And let me ask you as well, how do you feel your work connects to this show's theme?
On the surface of it, I think just the basic aesthetic considerations that everybody goes through. I have a circular form, the torus shape, and I have what could be more whole than a circle. I have considerations for how to get the surface texture of the form to work with the form, and how getting the colors to harmonize. But at a deeper level, I was going back looking at my work, and I was seeing, oh, there's a torus, there's a donut shape, there's another torus, way, way back decades ago. And I was reminded that I was thinking that when I was a kid studying geometry in school, and my dad was helping me with my homework, he got off on a tangent and talking about topology and Mobius strips and the torus shape, and how to formulas for finding volume and such. And so I think at a unconscious level, this is kind of a way to connect with someone who was for much of my life, kind of it was a fraught relationship with my father. So in this, and I think in all of my work, I'm looking for connection to parts of myself, connection to the universe. I see these things as microscopic worlds, as astrophysical objects. I think they work at different levels.
Absolutely. Thank you. So now I'd like to ask you about your process. So what can you tell us about your medium and your method of creating this beautiful piece?
I work a lot with acrylic paint, and I like just playing with the material to see what it'll do. By this point, I was using mixed down fluid acrylics and putting them into little cheap atomizer jars and misting the paint so that it fell on the horizontal surface of the panel I was working on, and gradually building up these fascinating arrays of organic looking patterns and color combinations. And then very often reading into them and seeing, well, what kind of shapes can I pull out of this and connect and make. And then going into this with brushes and creating these shapes on the surface of the torus form with ever smaller and smaller brushes.
So does that mean that the pattern, was it first random from the spray technique, and then you go back in with your brushes to make it?
Yeah, it was pretty random. I would just begin working on a splotch here and a splotch there. I had.
But that's how you generate the splotches, with the spray.
It was by the time I'm at this point, the whatever was done by the mist is gone, and it's all brushwork.
Okay, all right, so I'm missing.
There are other times when I will do a lot of masking and go back in and mist and create particular shapes just by how I've masked things off.
I see. So the misting is the more the background tones, the purple that we're seeing in this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The underpainting.
Yeah, an underpainting in a way.
Beautiful, thank you. And so finally, we're interested to hear how scale is important in your body of work. Is this size and treatment typical of your work in general?
Yeah, I guess I'm working in the scale of about a foot to 2 or 3 feet when I'm working on most things. Although every now and then I really like to punctuate things by going large, whether or not there's a venue for it. Since I'm making a lot of things out of clay, I will go to paper mache for larger things, because I could only fit maybe something that's 20 inches across in my kiln. And so with paper mache, I can work 4 feet long, 5 feet long in my ridiculously small studio. I tend to be very fussy and like to create these precious patterns and surfaces. So that's easier to do on a small scale than on a large scale.
And so successfully done here. It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So last but not least, we're going to speak with Andy Ong. Hi, Andy. Congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So your work was selected in the category of small performances. So a little different than we've been looking at so far, and different for 440 Gallery. We're so happy to have this kind of departure. So can you, just like everyone else, speak to your how your work relates to the theme of wholeness?
So, my definition of wholeness, in this context is really for me, is accepting and finding peace with everything that makes me me. I've dabbled in a lot of things. I'm actually, a civil engineer first is my day job, and, I just create, I've always been a prolific artist, and, I've moved from, music has been my foundation, but, I've dabbled in a lot of photography, some painting, now a lot of video work and animation and digital painting. And, the wholeness aspect is basically, my work is basically an intersection of all those things. And, it's of course a work in progress and an ongoing journey. But, I feel that, it's, I've always felt like I've been a jack of many trades, and a master of them. I'm trying to be a master of all of them too. But, I think I've always been in a spot where I've been indecisive of which to pursue, and through that process, I've had a lot of, insecurities and, what's it called? Oh man, I can't remember that term. But, just insecurities in my own work, my own skills. And, through the process of the last 2 years, it's just coming to accept, the skills that I have and really leverage them, to kind of find my own voice, my own way, in not just one medium, but in multiple mediums. So basically, I feel that my work is a reflection of my journey and a lot of my inner dialogue. Sometimes I use text, but my main medium, are through visuals and sound. Usually my visuals, where I started in photography, I try to find just quiet moments in my life. And, it's usually a representation or an abstraction of that moment, which kind of, I'm able to take out of context in that period in time. It kind of gives me a feeling of, it's like no one likes waking up at, 4:30 in the morning to go to work. But, you see, 4:30 in the morning during the winter time, you get to drive out to wherever you're going and you just see the most beautiful sunsets. And, I think it's easy to kind of get in the mood of, this really sucks, being up this early. But, I think I've gotten into the practice of really just appreciating, finding the beautiful in the mundane, basically. And, basically a lot of my work is just, footage from my everyday, and I just kind of abstract them and just put a surrealist spin on them to kind of, turn them into something different. And then the sounds of the music, are just reflections on, how I feel about things, so it's a, very meditative, introspective type of work that I produce.
Thank you. Before I ask the next question, were we able to have a whole piece embedded, Susan?
I think this one is embedded. If you go to the next slide.
We have
Yeah.
3 pieces embedded, so.
Okay, so let's watch and then we'll
Yeah.
ask Andy a few more
Okay.
questions.
Anytime you see a double, the second one is playable. And if you hover
Right.
over it, there'll be a play bar that'll show up.
Oops.
Thank you, Susan.
Oops.
So I just want to say that, again, if you can possibly make it to the gallery, to have this on this ethereal screen where you can see it from both sides and you're kind of immersed in the sound, it's a next level experience of Andy's work. So I encourage you to try and make it over there. And but I wanted to ask you about, you talked a little bit about the process, but what's the process that you get your imagery? How it's a little bit different in each piece, but can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, so I take a lot of B-roll footage of just things that I find striking in my everyday life. I work outside a lot, which is nice. So, for instance, there would be, just little things, I'm currently working, along a river right now, and I work on a barge, and, there's some crazy sunsets, the wave action, the clouds, even how the trees move, or, how the flocks of birds fly around. I'll just take, a few minutes to just stand there and just videotape just things I see every day. So, with that, then I, bring it into, my video editing tools, basically just kind of abstract them, play around, do some cuts. I also do a lot of digital painting. Actually, this one is a digital painting that I animated. So those are just brush strokes. So I think I try to just have fun with it, and generally I have music already in mind. I generally start with creating a song, or a track, a soundtrack. And with that, there's a lot of found sound. I've really dove into modular synthesis over the last 2 years, and it's a very different approach than your normal music writing or your normal synthesizing tools. It's very experimental, and you just kind of go in and explore. And I think, for the last year, I've been really focused on just exploring and just seeing, putting things together and seeing what works. But yeah, I use, again, a lot of synthesis and a lot of ambient recordings. iPhones these days are crazy. You can, I used to have to carry around, I have like all these little, Zoom recorders, samplers out, used to have in my backpack, and I'd go out and be like, oh, let me record that, and then afterwards I have to take the SD card out. But, now with your phone, it's a camera, photo camera, video camera, audio recorder. So, I just record a lot of assets. And, and I just kind of have a library of those, and I just, when the mood strikes, I kind of put something together.
Fascinating, thank you. So my final question is, these are called small performances, for an umbrella term for what we have on display at the gallery. How does that fit with your art making practice? Do you make longer works? Is this your main jam, combining the sound and the digital images? And what would a longer work be like?
So my philosophy of small works or small performances is that if you have enough small performances, you'll end up with a larger performance. So, I think I've struggled with larger projects. Again, I just have so many things that I want to do. It's kind of hard for me to focus on one thing sometimes. And, even now, the audio visual, it's been a very, much a recent, exploration. It's, the first time I was able to intersect everything that I love and just put it together into these little projects. And, I have a lot of small works now because it's been a lot of experimentation, and, mainly, with the way, people are consuming media these days through social media, I've been trying to find a way to kind of make a nice package for people to be able to, enjoy it, so, a lot of my works are, under 60 seconds, mainly for, for Instagram and things like that, just to have it easily shareable. But, for larger works, I am working on scoring a short film. I'm very much into scoring. I like making vibes, I like creating soundscapes, even my photography, I think it's very much a scene. I like making scenes. I like creating a scene, just creating an experience for someone to kind of get immersed into and just escape. Escapism, is a large theme in a lot of my music, for the longest time. And, so for, what's next is, I'd like to kind of, extrapolate what I have here and make it bigger. I've been looking into a lot of, making things more physical with reactive, reactive tools. There's like Touch Designer and things like that. I'd like to kind of make an installation where someone, can go into the space and kind of experience everything that I would like the person experience, through my visuals and through my music, through my sounds, and have them be able to interact with it and have different outcomes. With the tools we have these days, it's pretty fun and exciting. So, that's, sort of the next step I have in mind, is to kind of move on from, the smaller performances and really make, a larger installation piece. I've been reading a lot about, just, the physics of sounds. I've been trying to find ways to correlate, sound frequencies with, color, and try to have some sort of commingling of those two, and then bring that into a physical realm where people can feel, interact with it, and things like that. Especially with modular synthesis right now, there's a lot of ways you can interact with the machine. Actually, let me see if I can turn it. With the patch cables, there are a bunch of Euclidean algorithms that you can put in and basically make things self-generating. And if you add a human element to it, you kind of just, you're able to come up with things that, you can't really come up with through planning. It's kind of, spontaneous. and, you know, being in the moment. So yeah, look forward to seeing more work.
Very cool. Yeah, I can't wait to experience the interactive environment that you make. So we shall stay tuned. So now we're ready to open up questions to our audience. I'm just checking the chat. I don't see any questions in the chat at the moment. So Susan, do you want to stop screen sharing and people can unmute and ask our artists, or George, our curator, any questions?
I was very gratified to hear how much of the work has these deep personal roots, particularly with Paul's work and processing out, like, you know, family experiences and such like that. It's always amazing how much transference we put into work when we really mean it, and how clear it is when it's actually truly there. And also, civil engineer, Andy, that tells me a lot about you, man. That's why you're like so on it. I mean, you didn't have like, well, how many submissions did you have? Like 9 or 10 or 12? We took them all because they're all awesome. But
Yeah,
like,
I think I had 10, whatever the max was. I was like,
yeah, knowing that you're an engineer, now I get it all. It's like, you know, constant practice.
yeah,
and inspiration from the kind of edge situations that you're out in the world, and it's brilliant, man.
yeah, I got into, actually, it's like, you know, so I've always been into music, but, you know, there's a point in time where I kind of got bored of it, and I got into photography, you know, and that was out of, you know, a random thing where, you know, I was trying to repair a relationship with my younger brother, who's a very, very skilled and talented photographer. And I was like, I'll buy a camera and try it out. And, you know, and through there, you know, I just, you know, it was a lot of self-discovery because I was not a photographer. I never did anything. I just got the thing. And, you know, I just got really into capturing scenes, you know, like just candid shots, you know, documenting, you know, not necessarily like the action at hand, but more of the environment. And I translate that into, you know, everything that I do. It's like, I want to set a vibe, you know, like I said before, but yeah, you know, it's just like rent, you know, and with that, you know, I think, you know, through a lot of construction sites, it's like, it's pretty boring. It can be pretty boring, you know, at times. So I think I just developed a keen eye of just finding like random things, like, oh, wow, that's really cool. You know, it's like, let me just take a video of it, you know, and then from there, you know, I add my music, you know, I make different stuff with it. So yeah.
And Audrey, you didn't mention it specifically as a material in your work, but you use hemp.
Yeah, the hemp is dyed, the strings connecting the sculptural piece to the wood.
That's where the hemp is. Oh. Yeah, because
Actually,
I was waiting for you to get into that, and I was super curious, like, where's the hemp? But that makes a lot of sense.
yeah, I am actually incorporating a lot more in the next larger scale wall hangings I'm doing there. And I'd like to incorporate a little more fiber art, a little more weaving with this, the wooden elements. So you'll see a little more of that in the future.
Awesome. Are you familiar with the Textile Arts Center down the road from 440 in Brooklyn?
I am. I haven't been in there, but I would like to.
Yeah, you want to do fiber work, that's where all the goddesses and masters and queens are at, for real. I've been working with them for a few years now. They do such cool stuff there.
Amazing. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Yeah, and Audrey and Paul, you guys being, you know, sculptors, any thoughts on, you know, doing 3D scans of your work? You know, I think a lot of people are really into creating, you know, virtual reality spaces, you know, art spaces. And I know you know, people are incorporating their sculptures into those spaces, you know, via 3D scanning. So, you know, what are your thoughts on that?
I really like the collaborations that we're seeing a lot lately. Kind of the Yanko and the Sago have done that. He scanned in her sculpture and created, wrote a score, created some really interesting digital work, and they embedded an NFT and sold it at auction. I think the more that we can collaborate as creators together, I think the more interesting our work becomes, for sure.
I would be
Did you just
curious to
mention,
explore it.
I'm sorry, before you go any further, did you just mention Kennedy Yanko?
Yeah.
Cool. I'm glad to know she's still out there in the world. I worked with her 2012, 2011 last, and we lost touch. So good to know that she's out there in the world.
Art Basel this year, for sure.
Cool. So sorry, Paul, please go on.
Oh, it was something I was really curious about when I was teaching high school. Kept trying to think of ways to get funds to be able to do 3D scanning with my students. I know some artists locally that are starting to print sculptures, but at this stage, I think it seems to be still pretty limited as far as what one can afford to do to really small scale stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect that it's got kind of a steep learning curve. I don't know how much time and energy I'd want to devote to yet a whole new field.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Paul, were you talking about 3D printing?
Yeah, 3D printing.
Yeah, I think Andy was talking about virtual reality, 3D scanning for virtual reality. Is that what you were talking
Yeah,
about?
there's that too. Yeah. Yeah. Paul mentioned that he's trying to get funds for a 3D scanner, but it's,
Yeah.
it's, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's a whole new world of all the possibilities. And
Yeah.
and I love it because it makes it accessible to a whole different audience, I think. And then there's that learning curve and the money curve.
Yeah. I think that's why collaborations are fun, especially with the people with different disciplines, because you can kind of, get, experts in those little things. It's kind of like, the visual work, it's something like touch designer, which I'm trying to get into. It's just like another beast. It's like, well, I want to make music, but then there's this other thing I want to do. And it's like it takes a lot of discipline to kind of get, really get, excited to learn like something brand new. So George, you have any shows coming up?
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, well, we still have a good critical mass. Let's plug what we're doing on the 21st. So in coordination with 440 Gallery, Midheaven Network, the broadcast network that I founded last spring, is producing the Dark Night of Soul 2021 out of 440 Gallery. And this is an annual festival of art, music, and crucial conversations to explore and understand the shadow. We're kind of taking back the solstice as a ritualization opportunity inside of all the corporate nightmare of Christmas and, buy. And so we're centering our conversations on creative practice and the kinds of revolutions contained within. Sort of like how Audrey was talking about earlier, we're interested in what kind of seeds can germinate in the fire. And the darkest time of the year is a beautiful time to go into it. And so we'll be staging this out of 440 Gallery, a live broadcast. We can have an in-studio audience as well, TBD on how many bodies, as we found in the opening, folks don't mind hanging out on the sidewalk. So we have that. And we will, so far, we're confirmed to have Andy performing live, and the context and format on that is still TBD, but I'm listening super closely to everything you're laying down, man. And I was looking real close when you gave us that look under the hood at your tech. So I think you and I can have a lot of fun in terms of how we rock it. especially
Great.
if we go with making more of like a vibe, like you were saying, versus like a specific performance, maybe just a constant energetic flow. And so, you know, we'll be going through the exhibition in a little bit more detail then, and it'll primarily be a really interesting exchange between Amy, the gallery director, and Rebecca Irby, my co-founder at Midheaven. And I'm thinking that it would be awesome to invite as many of the artists as possible in as well, so that it's one more chance to get, you know, more space and time to explore these beautiful works that came together. But I'm seeing that we have a question in the chat, by the way, and it's for Andy.
Okay.
So I can read it for you. It's from Eric Howard. Andy, modular is so often associated with the moment performance. Does having modular work in the gallery setting feel different than performing live? Do you get to experience your music differently?
So, you know, what's interesting with, you know, modular synthesis in a whole is that, you know, you have a lot of patch cables. You know, I'll show you again. They're just a lot of patch cables and different patch ports. And generally, you know, the performances are very fleeting. You know, once you turn a knob, you know, to get it exactly back, you know, you kind of have to just remember, take a lot of notes. A lot of people do that, you know, they take photos, they take meticulous notes on what they do. But I think for me, you know, I do feel like the live performance is just very much, again, in the moment and very fleeting. So once it's over, if it's not recorded, you know, it's gone. I can try to recreate it, but of course it'll be an iteration of what I tried before. So every time I do it, it'll always be different. So that's kind of fun. But, you know, but having it in a gallery setting, you know, kind of gives control back, where I can really dial in, you know, the mood that I want to set, and having it, you know, especially with the video work that I have, you know, just finding, you know, just playing a really long set and just finding like the sweet spot, and just, you know, taking that and just kind of, you know, permanently putting that into a visual piece where, you know, it can replay, you know, as needed. But yeah, so it's kind of, you know, there's one aspect, you know, doing a live performance, you know, it's fun because you're gonna hear or do something that you're probably never, ever going to be doing again, or never hearing again. But at the same time of having, you know, a pre-recorded piece, is that you get to hear the best part of whatever, you know, that person or whatever I recorded. So yeah, so it's a different experience, but, you know, both have their perks, and, you know, it's just different.
Thank you, Andy.
No problem.
So this Dark Night of the Soul on the 21st sounds so exciting. I do hope that more of the artists will be there. I just wanted to check in with you, George. It's also going to be available to experience over Zoom. People can't make it to the gallery, or
Yes, the broadcast happens live on midheaven.network, and we'll also build a tunnel sort of like this one through Zoom. But then if the artists want to join in and be part of the broadcast, they can as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So let me say thank you to Paul and Audrey and Andy and George. So wonderful talking to you today. And again, this was just a taste of so many wonderful artists. So I hope you all will be able to make it to the gallery. It's up through January 7th. And then our next upcoming show after that is Artist Invite Artists 440 Gallery Invitational. And that's going to be January 12th through February 13th. That's a show of 13 artists invited by the members of 440 Gallery. So it's going to be very exciting. And stay tuned for that artist talk. So thanks everybody for coming today, and take care.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
You.
Talk to you all soon and be super safe. Bye.
Bye.